Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. And even though he needs no introduction, here is an introduction to our subject tonight.
Our next guest tonight really needs no introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Detroit's number 9, Mr. Hockey, Gordie Howe.
Yeah, Gordie Howe died recently at the age of 88. Where do you start with Gordie Howe? He was a country kid out of Floral, Saskatchewan, didn't do too well in school, and he only became the greatest hockey player of all time. I know there are people who put in for Wayne Gretzky or maybe Bobby Orr, and they're both good, but nobody was better than Gordie Howe. You know, we just did Muhammad Ali's podcast a couple of weeks back, and it's safe to say what Muhammad Ali was to boxing, Gordie Howe was to hockey. Even Babe Ruth to baseball would be an accurate analogy. Not just the greatest player in Detroit Red Wings history, he's the greatest athlete on any Detroit team ever. He held every scoring record as the right wing for the Red Wings on their famed production line, and he was also the toughest guy in hockey. Everyone in hockey respected him, but they were all afraid of him. I saw him at the Chicago Stadium back in 1963. Boy, did he put Stan Mikita into the boards right in front of me. And besides being the best and the toughest, he also had an incredible longevity. He played professional hockey in 6 different decades. Here's the story from the NHL Network on Gordie Howe, and it is an amazing one.
Hello everyone, Tony Luffman in Studio 21 with sad news to report. Gordie Howe, the man known as Mr. Hockey, has passed away. Considered one of the greatest all-around players the game has ever seen, Howe was a 23-time All-Star over his 26 seasons in the NHL and helped lead the Red Wings to 4 Stanley Cups. Number 9 left a lasting mark on the sport that few can match. Steve Mears takes a look back at the life of Gordie Howe.
He was Mr. Hockey, and his impact on the game was immense. Gordie Howe was a tantalizing mix of speed, skill, brawn, and brains. He could shoot or pass from either side. He could score, he could hit, and he could fight. That gave him lots of room on the ice and a special place in the history of hockey. Gordie Howe was born on March 31st, 1928, to humble roots in Floral, Saskatchewan, 1 year before the Great Depression. In 1946, a shy 18-year-old Howe found himself on the Detroit Red Wings roster. His nickname became Power, and the Red Wings became a powerhouse. Howe played on the production line with Sid Abel and Ted Lindsay, one of the greatest lines in NHL history. Together, they produced 4 Stanley Cups. Howe missed the first championship in 1950 after sustaining the worst injury of his career. He was knocked out of the semifinals with a skull fracture that required surgery to relieve pressure on his brain. He recovered to win the Art Ross Trophy the following season, and shortly after married his eventual wife of 55 years, Colleen. They had 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter. Together, they were Mr. and Mrs. Hockey, and they would work as a team in all aspects of life, particularly after teammate Bobby Baun informed Gordie that Detroit owner Jack Adams was taking advantage of him.
He said, "You're stupid." And I said, I said, "That's fine, I agree with that, but what's your reasoning?" He said, "I'm making twice as much as you are." And I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Well, how much am I making?" He told me. It woke me up in a hurry. And he said, "There's other people making more than you are in the club."
At Gordie's request, Colleen took over as his business advisor. She became the first female agent in professional sports and turned number 9 into a national brand.
Anybody who said anything against Gordie Howe, any member of our family, they're in trouble, period. And I don't care who. It could be the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of Canada. If he said something bad, yeah, he'd have to contend with her.
A pass for Howe. And Martin pops by. Here's Gordie Howe going in to get goal.
Gordie remained a force until the arthritis in his left wrist became so burdensome that he retired in 1971 after 25 seasons. He was enshrined in the Hockey Hall of Fame the very next year. But staying retired was one of the only things Gordie couldn't do well. 2 years after he hung up his blades, Colleen packaged a deal to have Gordie join sons Mark and Marty with the Houston Aeros of the World Hockey Association. They became the first father-son teammates in professional sports. After 2 Avco Cups and an MVP award, Gordie and his sons became Hartford Whalers in 1977. 2 years later, the Whalers were one of 4 WHA teams to merge with the NHL.
Now coming up on the right side. Now over the line to his father. Son to father. Back into they score! Father Howe. And number 5, Mark Howe.
Howe made a triumphant return to Detroit in that season's All-Star game.
And from the Hartford Whalers, representing all of hockey with great distinction for 5 decades, number 9.
Gordie Howe attempted to retire once more in 1980 at the age of 52. His career spanned 33 professional seasons over 5 decades. His records were astounding. He left as the game's all-time leader in goals, assists, and points. Howe played for 26 seasons and was one of the league's top 5 scorers for 20 of them. He racked up 22 consecutive 20-goal seasons and claimed 6 Art Ross trophies. Number 9 won 6 Hart trophies and was an All-Star 23 times. But old habits are hard to break. Howe returned in 1997 to sign a 1-game contract with the Detroit Vipers of the International Hockey League. He played 1 shift to become the only player ever to play in 6 decades. Howe didn't quite have his old burst, but then again, he was 69 years old.
Please welcome the winners of this year's Lifetime Achievement Award, Gordie and Colleen Howe.
Gordie put his final retirement to good use. As an ambassador, he used his self-deprecating humor and humility to promote the game and charitable causes. Colleen lived long enough to see Gordie named as the winner of the NHL's inaugural Lifetime Achievement Award in 2008.
After I retired 16 years ago, you mentioned that you wish I would have worn your number 9 Red Wing jersey for just 1 game.
As Gordie's mental health began to decline, he watched with immense pride as his son Mark was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2011. To many, he was the greatest all-around player the game had ever seen. And there couldn't be a name more fitting than Mr. Hockey.
Well, there's 3 aspects to Gordie Howe as a hockey player: his skill, his toughness, and his personality. So we'll take a little look at each one. Here are a bunch of players from the 50s, his greatest decade, talking about Gordie Howe's skills.
Personally and professionally, Gordie Howe was on top of his game as he reigned as league scoring champion for 4 consecutive seasons.
Gordie almost looked like maybe he might be falling asleep out on the ice. That's how relaxed he was, you know. And he had a great gift that he could, if there was a stoppage of play, he could kneel down on the ice and recover very quickly. He had that gift.
He could be on the ice so long. The stamina, the strength, his natural ability, to me, made him the players that he was. And I've always had, too, the feeling that he enjoyed playing the game so much. So if you put all those great ingredients together, what make a superstar like he is, he's in a class by himself.
He was the one guy without a weakness. He had wonderful shots, front hand, backhand. He was ambidextrous, so could shoot from both sides. He was big, he was tough. He was a wonderful skater. He had maximum anticipation. Gordie, in his whole career, never wasted a step. He could figure out where the puck was going, and he'd go there in the shortest distance. He was a great defensive player who knew how to play in his own hand, and he was as tough as any man who ever played.
He could kill penalty, pay the power play, regular shift. He used to carry the puck smooth, very dangerous. He could shoot the puck. Strong player. He was a very, very, very strong player, Gordie.
He could do everything on the ice, and he was so big and strong that you feared him when he was out there. And he could put the puck in the net, he could make the plays. He was the all-round ultimate hockey player at that time.
In the 1950s, 4 Stanley Cup championships and 6 consecutive first-place finishes made Gordie Howe and the Detroit Red Wings the top team in the game. For Gordie, the Stanley Cup meant everything.
And the only thing of sadness too is hey, I have to do it all over again next year. It's not like something you can keep forever. You have to earn it every year you play. So it's when we won it 4 or 6 years, that was the core of a great hockey club.
As for his toughness, he literally tested every player who came into the league. And here he talks about his legendary reputation.
Roughness, you can bang people around. Even rough, you can be in conversation with somebody. For instance, some of the guys I respected and knew as boyhood idols, and especially in my early days, I'd yell, "Look out," and then I'd hit them. If I didn't like him, I'd yell out when I hit him. It was dirtiness is the little extra. You can't say I didn't warn him, and that's unfortunately that's the way the game's being played any edge you can apply to your given tricks can result in a win. And I just took offense to it, but digging back there was, it could shorten a player's life, and I didn't like that. That's the only thing I knew. The elbowing was done with anybody back here who was holding my stick or had it around my, his stick around my belly. I'd just pull his stick forward and give him a little shot so he'd release it, and that way, if they get enough hits in the head, they would not use that particular tactic on me. And I always felt my stick was my tools, and somebody else put their hands on it. I didn't like that.
His tough guy reputation carried over even to protecting his sons.
Crazy part came in after I was through in the NHL, some of it during, but after when I joined Marty and Mark, if anyone hit those one of the kids, I went a little crazy because I'd chase them all over the ice to let them know that nobody touched those boys. And I guess, in essence, I was taking a policeman's role where I didn't have to. Mark told me one night, Dad, he said, I've been trained to absorb a check up to about 240, but when you add your weight to it, he said, it kills me, so please get the guy after the fact.
And finally, the things that made Gordie Howe unique. Here's Sid Abel from that production line. I love the Sid Abel line. We hated the Toronto Maple Leafs so much. We play hockey for money, but we play them for free.
Well, I'd been there probably 7 or 8 years before I got a chance to be on the same line with Gordie and Ted Lindsay. And I remember the guys on the bench, Bob Goldham and a few of them say, look, give the big guy the puck and they'll deliver the mail, as they used to say. So I never forgot that.
And finally, in talking about Gordie Howe was such a fearsome guy, I want to include a story from a Chicago Blackhawk great of the next era, Jeremy Roenick. Gordie Howe could also be the most charming man in the game.
I was 7 years old at the time, and we playing our Saturday games, and we knew that the Hartford Whalers were coming onto the ice to have their pregame skate. They skated at the same arena and practiced. So we got off the ice and everybody took their skates off, and all the kids were excited that the Hartford Whalers were coming on the ice, and we all ran back up and all hanging over the glass as the Hartford Whalers came out. And that was the time when Gordie Howe was playing for the Hartford Whalers. He was playing with his sons, Marty and Mark. You know, they were the big thing in town. So as they're skating around and all these kids are lined up down the glass with their hands over, looking at watching as every guy went by, at one point in the practice, Gordie Howe came, scooped up a whole bunch of snow and dumped it on top of my head. And I sat there and I'm like, holy, I didn't swear at the time, believe it or not. Holy cow, Gordie Howe just dumped snow on my head. And all the kids are looking at me. I had snow coming out, and Gordie Howe skated around the ice again and came back. And I was wiping the snow off my head, and he came back again, and he looked at me and he winked at me. And I thought that was so cool because, there were kids all lined up down the glass, but he didn't pick any of those kids to dump snow on their head. He dumped it on my head. So for that 30 seconds, it was me and Gordie Howe and nobody else. And that's the way I looked at it. And it made such an impression on me that I told the story in school. I told the story when I was 10. I told the story when I was 15. I told the story forever. But I realized that whether it's a sports personality or an icon or a hero, whatever the case may be, you can make an impact by doing nothing. Because in Gordie Howe, it was nothing for him to put snow on my head. But for me, who looked up to somebody like that, it was like life-changing. It gave me a story. It made me relevant in what I was doing and what he was doing. And I knew that, listen, if he gave me a story for the rest of my life.
Jeremy, you're right. Gordie Howe gave a lot of people stories for the rest of their lives. I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. I know some people would say the greatest athlete to ever wear the number 9 was Ted Williams, but I'm sorry. I got to go with Mr. Hockey, Gordie Howe. And in tribute to the great number 9, Gordie Howe, we're going to play a little bit of Mahler's Ninth Symphony, which Leonard Bernstein called his last will and testament. It was a defining moment in music the same way that Gordie Howe was a defining moment in hockey.